So glad you are with us on Elevate Your Wealth. Brad Johansson along with Mark Stimpson, Casey Elkins. It is Elevated Financial Management. We're glad you're with us. Nice to be back with you guys.
Always great to see you, Brad. We're excited to be here.
Glad to be with you too, Brad.
So you are shining, my friend. We are ready to glow, and we're going to feel the glow through all of this. Thank you for being with us. The whole point for all of you is to try and get this right. This thing that you're going to hopefully do only once, that's retire. And you try and find the experts to get it done. There are things that you know, probably a few things that you don't know, and we're trying to address a lot of the things that you don't know. For many of you, you're trying to retire as a couple and trying to figure this whole thing out, and you figure it out together. What you haven't considered is very few of you are going to die together. And hey, men, I've got a secret for you. We're stupid, which is why we usually die first.
Speak for yourself, Brad.
I am speaking straight for myself. The average widow is at 59 years old in America right now.
That's staggering.
Meaning we don't hang on for very long, meaning the women are going to get all of the money in the end, and yet we seem to be planning as couples and rather for anything like that. Mm-hmm. What's wrong with the failure to do so, Mark?
Yeah, if you have recently lost a spouse, maybe you're recently divorced, hopefully you're watching the show today, because this is a segment that both Casey and I feel very strongly about that's underserved. You are not getting the attention that we believe you deserve. And there is so much that goes into planning for a widow or somebody a woman that might be recently divorced that doesn't get planned for. You mentioned it, Brad. We plan for couples a lot of the time. Yeah. And you know, what we call the widow's penalty, income can be reduced dramatically if maybe the husband didn't take 100% spousal benefit, maybe he took a 50. Then, even if you get bumped up to what your spouse was making as far as Social Security goes, one of them still goes away. So there could be a mass reduction in income that was never planned for. And if you don't have a plan for this, that woman is dealing with grief and so many other issues that the financial things have to be put on the back burner, because we've talked about the emotional part of retirement planning. Mm-hmm. And we just believe this is critical. And the women that are out there, if you're facing these type of situations in your life, please give Elevated a call, because we care about this. We're excited about serving this market even more than we are right now. We're excited about bringing on a female advisor. And so we believe dearly that this is somebody that needs a lot of help. And I think you'd probably agree with that, right, Case?
I do, yeah. You know, and the reality is I mean, you mentioned it, Brad, most of the time it is the male passing away first, right?
Most of the time.
Yeah, but you know what, the other side of that coin is there too, right? Where, you know, I'll share personal. My wife, she pays most of the bills for the home. She takes care of all those kinds of things, and she does a phenomenal job. And in reality, there's a lot of circumstances like that where the wife leads the charge in certain areas, and there's other areas where the man leads the charge. But the truth of it is when either one of those goes first, it leaves a hole, not just emotionally, but it leaves a hole of somebody who took care of those responsibilities. And there has to be an understanding for both sides of how to pick up that slack when that type of event does happen. But, you know, it's not a fun conversation. It's not a fun conversation for us to even have now, right? But it is a reality, and it's something to consider. And, you know, there's something that, you know, we just gather different articles to figure out what we're going to talk about on the show. But there's something that I wanted to highlight from this.
Please do.
It says grief impairs concentration, memory, and confidence for months or years. And then here's the key: yet decisions are demanded almost immediately. Yeah. And that really is the truth, where at a time when we don't know what to do, we've lost our spouse, we're trying to pick up the slack, there are now suddenly so many decisions that have to be made at a time when we are probably least qualified to make them. And the reality is nobody can make them for you. you have got to make those decisions. Now, ideally, you've got somebody on your side that can help guide you, that can help you figure these things out. But nonetheless, this is a very complicated time in somebody's life. And it's something that we have got to be planning for, not only financially, but also planning for as far as the continuation of that plan. That person's life shouldn't just stop. They should still be able to continue on in the plan. But we got to find a way to make sure that does happen.
Okay. Can I go to stress test on something like this? Because kind of what I pointed out at the very beginning is we're planning on this as a couple. Well, that's what we plan on. How do we stress test this for when we lose one of those? And is it recommended within that plan that part of this strategy, because Mark, you kind of mentioned Social Security, which a lot of times we do in a silo. I'll do one, you do one. We haven't figured this whole thing out. How do we stress test this for the what if? I don't know anybody who's made it out alive. Father Time gets us all. So it's going to happen kind of thing, but can we just talk about that later? How do we stress test before the later happens a long time before?
Yeah, this is something that has to be addressed, as Brad just mentioned, because what we want to do, we have some cool software. We call it the SIPS program, right? Structured Income Planning. And we want to know, this is why I'm going to go back. You mentioned Social Security. So when you decide to claim is huge, because if you wait until you're 70, now so many families can't do that, but if you do, if the husband passes away and he waited till 70, the wife is going to get bumped up to his 70 number. Now that can help tremendously, but it doesn't work for every plan. In fact, most of our clients, we don't wait till 70. But still, I think the bigger one is the important decision that's made if you're fortunate enough to still have a pension. We know clients that they just look at the bigger number and they want to take that one. And that's usually a life-only option, meaning if they get one check and pass away, that's the end. The pension's gone. And that actually happened to my grandfather on my mom's side. So he died with a huge amount in his pension, and my grandma didn't get any of that. And it was very unloving. So the decision that gets made on pensions, that's set in stone too. You can't go back a year later and go, what did I do? What did I do to my spouse? The person hopefully you love, the most in your life, and you might have just totally devastated her financially if you pass away early or even late and that pension goes away, or maybe it's a 50%, right, that it's not like she is going to be happy to cut the income in half just because you passed away. It's not like if we lose a spouse that our expenses are just whacked in half, and it doesn't work that way. There's going to be some reduction, but it's not going to be possibly 50%, not even close to that. So again, you have to plan for this, and I hope those that are listening will give us a call, because we take very seriously so that widow's penalty doesn't end up being as devastating to those that don't do any planning, and that it just hits them, and they, like you said, they're dealing with it in an emotional crisis, and it's the worst time to be making decisions like this, right? So it needs to be done way ahead of time.
It does, and there's a tax penalty for being single, right? I mean, there
that's
really
the
is.
other
The
one.
tax rates are higher. The income limits are higher, or lower, I should say. So what that does is it pushes you into a higher tax bracket at a lower income.
You go from best to worst pretty quickly.
Exactly, right? So now it can be a compounding effect where if we have one Social Security disappear, we maybe have a pension disappear or get cut in half, we're in a higher tax bracket, and we now have more IRMA to deal with, income-related monthly adjustment amount on your Medicare. Now we have all these things fighting against us, and it can really start to be a layered issue. And if we don't do the right type of planning up front, that's what most people are facing. And you know what? By the time you get to that, it's too late. There's not much to be done about it. Right. And so we have got to make those right decisions up front. And just like you said, Brad, it isn't just making that Social Security decision in a silo. It's how do we build this plan together as a couple, but also what does it look like when one of us does pass away? How does that affect the other spouse? How do we make sure that there's a continuation so that that person is still taken care of? And it's a strong, written financial plan that helps make that happen.
We talk about the runway all the time. How long is your runway to make these decisions? And we don't ever have any idea how long our runway is until the very end. But when we have time to plan for things on the what if, it gives us so much more power. We talk about those C's all the time. You would like some clarity, to be able to develop some confidence so that you can have some control, to create some comfort. And the idea on all of that being put together as a plan, 844-342-7142. What we're offering is for you to put together a comprehensive written financial plan where all of this is involved in getting to the end the way that you would like the end to go, even though we don't know what the plan is going to lead us to. We put together this plan that's going to be adjustable throughout that time. 844-342-7142. Do that now. Be right back.
Call 844-342-7142 for your own complimentary written financial plan with Risk Report. Why take unnecessary risk when you don't have to? At 65 years old, would you drive to the grocery store at 100 miles an hour if 40 miles an hour would get you there safely? When nearing retirement, are you still driving your investment accounts like you're in your 30s or 40s? Have you changed your investment elections since you first chose them in your retirement accounts at work? Call Casey, Mark, and the team at 844-342-7142 for your own investment risk report and written financial plan. Do you know exactly how much risk you're taking in your investment accounts? Now that you've accumulated a nest egg for retirement, you want to be certain the risk you're taking in those investments matches your goals and objectives. Call Mark, Casey, and their team at 844-342-7142 for your own complimentary risk report and written financial plan, or use the QR code below to begin scheduling your appointment. You may not have time to recover from taking too much risk.
You've got quite an extensive resume. Wow, so many years of management. Bet that was fun. So this job requires basic knowledge of the social media and video platforms, content creation, and SEO. How proficient are you in those areas?
Going back to work after retiring is not ideal. Plan your retirement right. Call now for your own complimentary portfolio review and tax analysis.
Glad you're with us on Elevate Your Wealth. Brad Johansson, along with Mark and Casey. And we're talking about the things that don't always end up pleasing us because they're difficult decisions, which is why for most of us, we kick the can down the road until we absolutely have to. When we were talking about the widow's tax and dealing with a lot of what one left after two is going to do, I kind of want to get into grief and decision making, because we talk about this all the time, that we make financial decisions emotionally far too often, usually based on fear or greed. But if we pull in grief in this decision, I suppose this is a severely overlooked risk when we're dealing with this, especially as we start to advance in age and have so many things before us that we may have to deal with.
Yeah, we talked about how income can change, right, at that first death, but there are several others that I'd like to maybe talk about. What if you have life insurance? You're going to have to be making a decision, what type of settlement option do you want to take, right? That's going to be a big one. That's one of them. I love the thought of what am I going to do with RMDs, required minimum distributions, because those can possibly change, right? You can do a spousal assumption. So there's a lot of things that you're going to have to tackle. Another one, I love, Casey mentioned earlier, the tax planning, the brackets change. Now you're a single filer instead of, married filing jointly. But another one that I think doesn't get addressed enough is, what about housing? Now all of a sudden, maybe the husband did a lot of work outside, maintaining the yard, if you have a garden. And so who's going to do that? Now, I have a dear friend, and she said the husband passes away. There's no way she wants to stay there because she can't take care of it. Yeah. See, so that's a big one that's going to come up. So there's so many things that we want to address with our clients that we believe get overlooked. If all you're worried about is just the money piece of this, it's not going to be enough. you need to deal with some of the neurological or the things that are going to happen to us in our minds and what we'll have to deal with if we lose a trusted loved one, especially a spouse. So again, these are some of the things that I think we need to talk about.
As a matter of fact, I mean, in our office, Mark, if we have a spouse come in without their partner, what exactly
do we usually say?
Right. Well, we will have that conversation. We'll talk, right?
Yep.
Because it is still an important conversation, so we will. But at the same time, we always ask for them to bring their spouse
Yes,
the next time.
absolutely.
And the reality is that one spouse does typically drive the ship, right?
Sure.
And we've seen it be men, we've seen it be women. That's not really what's at discussion here. Somebody leads that ship, somebody steers the ship. And so if something happens to that spouse, that's the co-pilot, or that's the pilot, really, right, of the overall plan.
Yeah.
And so if something happens to them, that other spouse not only needs to know that they are taken care of, but they also need to know how they're taken care of, and they also need to feel comfortable with the people that helped put that plan together. And so there's a lot of parts and pieces to this, and it's something that doesn't just happen in a 30-minute conversation. It doesn't happen in an hour conversation. It takes time to feel comfortable with that plan, how it's structured, and then to have that relationship so that when you are dealing with potentially the most emotionally traumatic experience of your life, you know exactly who to lean on and to help you make those decisions. And that's something that really gets overlooked a lot, like you said, Brad.
If you go back to the plan, I'll go back to something that Mark said. You know, I had a woman and he was dealing with the garden, and I can't take care of that. This is part of what, and when we put the number out there to say, you know, let's put together a plan. And this may be, for some of you, the first time you start thinking about a lot of these things. When you have folks come in, it is standard. Is this your forever home?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Hadn't thought about that. Are you buying another home somewhere else? Oh, hadn't thought about that. Are you going to be traveling the country? Mm-hmm. All of these things are part of the plan that we get to. Okay, what's your wish list for this lifestyle that's going forward? And if something happens, how are we planning for this? This is a standard part of the let's put together a holistic plan, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, it is.
Yeah, I was just, there's a point in this article that I really want to highlight. It says, perhaps the most underestimated impact of widowhood is the erosion of self-trust. All of a sudden, they may be asking, am I doing this wrong? Mm-hmm. You know, I've lost all my confidence. Maybe I'm going to let somebody else decide what I should do. See, this is one of the things, again, it's so far past the importance of the money at this point. We all need money. We all know that. But this loss of confidence, not knowing what to do, the brain fog that can set in, this is something that we believe very much we want to talk about in our office. It's hard for us when we have a couple that is doing very well, but maybe they've been savers. But the hard part is getting them to become good spenders.
Yeah.
See, that's all up here, right? Usually we show them that they can do it, but they still have to change mentally. And this just goes through the roof if we lose somebody that was maybe driving, as you mentioned, Case, to the ship. Mm-hmm. Now all of a sudden I was a first mate, now I got to be the captain. And they're not ready for that. And that's why we feel so compelled to make sure that the spouses come in together, because we're talking with them. What if? Do you know where all your documents are? All of the things that need to be addressed should be done together, because you mentioned it, Brett. At some point, Father Time's going to get one of us. Okay, that's for sure.
He'll get all of us.
It'll get all of us, right? And most of the time, it doesn't happen at the same time.
Yeah.
So we got to plan for this.
Let's put together the plan for you. If some of this is resonating, 844-342-7142. And if it just sparks something, you said, you know what, I know that I need to put a plan together. I would like to plan for the what if before something else happens and before the grief sets in and before my mind just can't take the financial decisions because I've got so much else to deal with. 844-342-7142. Let's put a plan together for you. It's a complimentary written financial plan. Maybe for a lot of you, it's just a phone call. Can I check in and see whether or not this works? Let's do it now at 844-342-7142. We're back after this.
Call 844-342-7142 for your written financial plan and inflation report. Inflation continues to hit all-time highs. Will your investments provide you the income you need in retirement? Are you losing purchasing power of your savings to inflation? Don't let runaway inflation erode your retirement dreams. Now is the time to act to be certain you have an income strategy that overcomes the effects of inflation. Call Mark Casey and their team at 844-342-7142 for your no-cost financial plan with Inflation Report. You might have the savings you need today to weather the storm, but how will inflation affect your nest egg 5, 10, 15 years from now? Discover the peace of mind you deserve. Call Casey, Mark, and the team at 844-342-7142 for your no-cost written financial plan with Inflation Report, or use the QR code to schedule your appointment today.
Glad you're with us. Thanks for being here. Brad Johansson along with Mark Stimpson, Casey Elkins. Elevated wealth is what you're looking for. I mean, for a lot of you, it's trying to figure this whole thing out. We've spent some time on what you hadn't planned for, the stuff that's not fun to talk about. Guys, I want to spend the last few minutes on what widow-ready planning actually looks like. Lead me off on this, Casey. What do we need to know?
You know, there's the kind of the standard things, really, right? Of the projections of what income will look like when one spouse passes away. What happens to the Social Security? What happens with tax brackets? I would say that's the very baseline of widowhood planning. But the article makes a really solid point that I just really want to stress. It says solo decision preparation. And I think that's the key, is that when something does happen to your spouse, have you had a meaningful conversation with your advisor about not only the decisions that will have to be made, but how those decisions should be made when the time comes, and who to reach out to, what paperwork needs to be taken care of, all those things. It isn't just about the modeling. We all have these sophisticated softwares and we can run those things. And again, that's the basics, right? And that's a good starting point. But how do we emotionally deal with this and make sure that we are making the right decisions and that we know how to go about it? And I just think that's something that really gets missed. And it's something that really you as the retiree, you've got to be having these conversations with your advisor, especially if they're not having them with you already.
What else is essential for you, Mark?
Yeah, why does this matter? I just love some of the points that are brought out here. I love the fact it says this is going to be predictable from the standpoint that women usually are outliving men. And I love the point that it makes. Yet many retirement plans still assume stability instead of disruption. What a perfect point that is, because when that stability goes away at that first death, it is disruption. And I love what it said here. This client once said, I wish we had known not about death, but about what living afterward would require. What a perfect question or statement that is. We knew one of us was going to pass away, and I know I'm going to pass away eventually, but I didn't realize what life was going to be like when that first death occurred. And she would have sure liked to have talked about this a little more than she did. So we're just encouraging those that are watching today or listen to our radio show, please give us a call. Let's talk about this. Let's formulate a plan so that we are doing some stress testing once that first death does occur.
Right, and you know what? We've talked about this before, Mark. There's the pain of regret and the pain of discipline.
That's it.
And you know what? The reason these conversations don't get had, it's a painful conversation.
Yeah.
It's an emotionally taxing conversation. It isn't a fun topic, but it's the pain of discipline that would have allowed the person in this article to look back and say, you know what? It wasn't fun at the time, but I'm so glad that we did it, because now I can have the freedom to grieve instead of having to deal with all these things. But really what she expresses in this article is the pain of regret that she didn't have the conversations, that they had put together a financial plan, but that financial plan assumed continuance until both of them passed away at the same time. But that isn't reality. Now, we can't plan for every scenario, but we can start to put things together. And so the article makes a couple of great points and things that really we think everybody should be asking their advisor. Whether you work with folks at Elevated or you work with somebody else, we want to share these with you. So have single filer taxes been modeled so that when one spouse does pass away, what does that tax burden look like for that spouse that's continuing on? How does that affect their tax brackets? What does it do to IRMA? And realistically, what does it do to their income? That's what this is about. And so it's all, again, some of these are kind of basic things, but they're things that are often missed and, again, often not brought up because it's not fun to talk about.
You know, one quick thought on that. I love this last point. It says a retirement plan that only works while both spouses are alive is incomplete. Widowhood is not a planning failure. It is a planning reality, and it deserves to be modeled as one. I think that's so important. We've been mentioning this. Too many planners don't address this, right? The accumulation advisors 99% of the time don't, but we believe it needs to be talked about, and you need to have a plan for this, because you will be so thankful when that first death occurs that you have a plan and know how to deal with so much stress and the things that are going to come, decisions that will have to be made when that death occurs.
Right. I think, Casey, in a lot of these cases, it is that you can't avoid the emotional part of what life is doing to you. Mm-hmm. We talk about building guardrails around grief decision making, which is why you have an advisor that you trust, who cares about you, but the emotion of the financial decisions are taken out of it, because this is what we do for you when things get hard.
Right. That's it. Those are the guardrails, and that's what you have to be able to fall back on. It's almost kind of like muscle memory, right? Have you ever done something so many times that when something happens, you just naturally, instinctively do that thing that you've been training yourself to do? It's the same thing with our finances. We have got to have that muscle memory built in so that when something unexpected does happen, we know how to respond, we know who to reach out to, we know exactly what to do, so that we can deal with that emotional piece and try to separate the two. Because a financial decision that is made solely out of emotion is oftentimes the wrong one.
And you need a plan before all of that happens. So make the call now, 844-342-7142. This isn't a scare tactic. This is the reality of life and death that continues to move forward with all of us. We want a plan that deals with every contingency that you can think of. 844-342-7142. Before all the chaos hits, why don't you take some time now for yourself to say, I'd like to put together a complimentary written financial plan. I've watched for a while. Now I'm going to make that call. Hope you do that now. And we hope to see you in the office, because this is what experts do. You want an expert on your side. We're right back here next time on Elevate Your Wealth. Thanks for joining us.